Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Monday afternoon. The Oregon Ducks commitment sweatshirt comes back on for a name that we haven't talked a ton about in relationship to Oregon. And the Oregon fans who've been rocking with the fellas for a while know we've talked a lot about this program on the recruiting trail. Three-star offensive lineman, Koloi Keli, committing to Oregon. This one's fascinating and quite frankly should excite a lot of Oregon fans. A little bit of a squattier body, I don't think he's quite 6'3", maybe 6'2", 300 pounds, built like an absolute house. An extremely explosive and powerful individual that also has some really intriguing athleticism. Look, we'll talk more about the player in just a second. I think you got to start with this. Hey, when's the last time Oregon went to Honolulu, Hawaii, specifically the high school of Farrington? Yeah, it was in the 2023 cycle for a guy named Poncho. And if you're an Oregon fan saying, hey, these are actually very similar kind of football players, say, hey, we can get another Poncho. We'll take that every single day of the week. In fact, I think that's the position that he's going to play. Probably a future center for the Oregon Ducks. Look, I'm a trust Dan Lanning. I'm a trust Malik Terry. And here's the thing. Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks, they've been very disciplined in terms of who they want to offer and who they want to take into their program. Like Oregon, even in 2025, was not a very big class, but it was a very talented class. Oregon in 2026, it ain't going to be a massive class, but it's going to be a talented class. They don't take guys at the high school ranks out of desperation. And so when they do take guys out of the high school ranks, this coaching staff likes them a lot. And I think Oregon and Malik Terry like this kid a lot, and he's a very exciting football player. I want to talk about the ranking real quick. This is a lower ranked player. One of the lower ranked players that we've seen Oregon bring in over the last couple of years. When you deal with kids from the state of Hawaii, it's just the fact of the matter is these recruiting services, they only have so many scouts who go around the country and evaluate these kids. When you're out there in Hawaii, it's hard to have a lot of these scouts get eyeballs on you. And so sometimes when you're out there, you just tend to slide in the rankings. You look at where most of these scouts are kind of centered: Florida, Texas, some in California. So if I'm an Oregon fan, there's two reasons why I'm not too concerned about the ranking. Number one, kid from Hawaii probably hasn't gotten as much exposure as some of the other kids across the country. Number two, like trust me, Dan Lanning, Malik Terry, they've done their due diligence on this kid. They don't take guys they don't like. And so I think Oregon likes him a lot, flipping him from Cal. Excited to get into the player. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Oregon fans. Has it always been the most fun over the last couple of weeks talking this program on the recruiting trail? No. I think it's going to get a lot more fun over the next couple of days and weeks. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We got a few more coming over the next couple of days. Without further ado, let's get into Koloi Keli. Powerful kid, plays left tackle at the high school ranks, and that's probably where you start. He's a mauler. This is a guy that I think can still play with some better pad level, but when he does it right, that squattier frame, his ability to play with good leverage and get underneath opposing defensive linemen, it is certainly there. And he's a very naturally strong, but also explosive kid. Like the way this kid gets out of his stance, it's a little bit different from a lot of the other offensive linemen that you see across the country. Number two, he's a good athlete. Plays left tackle, and they ask him to do a lot of different. They play him as an H-back a little bit. Put him in motion and go have him be a lead blocker. Really good athlete in space. And you look at some of the things Oregon asked a guy like Powers Johnson's to do, or a guy like Poncho to do. Hey, not only do you have to be really powerful at the line of scrimmage, we are going to ask you to go climb to the second level and put a helmet on a linebacker. And I think because of the athleticism this kid has, I think he's going to be able to do that at a very high level. And I think what should excite Oregon fans, and I think probably make you feel good about this commitment is, look, we know that this is a big cycle for Oregon on the offensive line. We want to see them go 3 for 3 with these names that are not highlighted. Well, all three of those names are, I think have some versatility, but all three of these names could play tackle. Emmanuel is probably a guy that probably start at right tackle, maybe kick to the inside. Tommy Tofi, very similar situation. Then Kelvin Abad is a prototypical, potential future left tackle for Oregon. Getting a guy that is going to be a quality football player on the inside of the offensive line, it certainly helps. Now, is a guy like Koloi Keli going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick or a first round NFL draft pick, like Josh Connerly was, or a guy like Kelvin Abba could be? No, probably not. Kind of get the sense that he's going to be a quality football player for Oregon and probably start a lot of games at the center position over the next couple of years. He's got a really good relationship with Poncho. Kind of reminds you of Poncho coming out of high school as well. It's not the flashiest name that Oregon had on their board, but I think it's a very valuable addition to this class. Where does Oregon go from here? I think it starts with prioritizing those three offensive linemen. You land Emmanuel, you land Calvin Abbott, you land Tommy Toffee. And Tommy Toffee also committed to Cal, so you're trying to flip him as well. You feel really good about the offensive line class, which was probably priority number one for Oregon in the 2026 cycle. The other name to keep an eye on is Jalen Lott. Ball player, two-way guy that probably is going to play wide receiver, difference maker with the football in the air, difference maker with the football in his hands. This kid is not only a very good football player, but he also fits what Oregon wants to do at a very high level. We talked about this yesterday afternoon. I'll say it again. This is not going to be a massive class for Oregon on the recruiting trail. Dan Lanning has been very, very disciplined in terms of the players and the scholarship spots that he wants to use. Him taking a kid at the high school ranks tells you this staff believes in what he can be. Because you see Oregon, we ain't going to pivot that much. We miss out on some players because we're taking big swings. We ain't just going to take guys to take guys. I think that's the sense I get with a guy like Koloi Keli. Ideally, kind of, you maybe feel some of the, and it's been fits and starts for Oregon, right? You had the commitment of Richard Wesley, then he decommits, and you kind of feel like, oh, maybe we're getting some momentum, and you don't really get it. The month of July, it feels like that momentum is starting to bubble up and maybe manifest into some commitments. We'll break it down as they come in. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.